Question 1. Market research demonstrates that many learner drivers in Auckland, New Zealand, are eager to book their practical driving test as soon as they feel a degree of confidence. As a driving instructor, what is the most responsible and regulatory compliant approach when a student expresses readiness for their test, but your professional assessment indicates they are not yet consistently meeting the required standards for safe driving and passing the official NZTA test? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive mock driving test that mirrors the official NZTA practical driving test, providing detailed feedback on performance against specific criteria, and only recommend booking the test when the student consistently demonstrates the required competencies. Option B. Advise the student to book the test and give it a go, suggesting that the examiner will likely pass them if they are close to meeting the required standard, as the goal is to get them on the road. Option C. Book the practical driving test immediately upon the student's request, assuming their confidence is a sufficient indicator of readiness, and that the examiner will provide guidance during the test. Option D. Refuse to book the test and insist on a significant number of additional lessons without clearly articulating the specific skill deficits or how they relate to the NZTA practical driving test requirements. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive mock driving test that mirrors the official NZTA practical driving test, providing detailed feedback on performance against specific criteria, and only recommend booking the test when the student consistently demonstrates the required competencies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Auckland, New Zealand, regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of a student's perceived readiness for the practical driving test. The instructor must balance the student's eagerness with the responsibility to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the testing process, as governed by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA guidelines. Misjudging a student's competence can lead to a failed test, potential safety risks on the road, and damage to the instructor's professional reputation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the student's driving skills against the NZTA practical driving test standards. This means conducting a mock test that simulates the actual examination environment, covering all required competencies such as hazard perception, vehicle control, adherence to road rules, and independent driving. The instructor should provide constructive feedback, identifying specific areas for improvement, and clearly communicating to the student the criteria for passing the official test. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the NZTA mandate to ensure drivers are competent and safe, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. It prioritizes the safety of the student and other road users by ensuring the student is genuinely prepared, not just eager. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with booking the test based solely on the student's confidence and repeated requests, without a formal, objective assessment. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement of ensuring a driver is competent before they undertake a formal test. It disregards the NZTA emphasis on demonstrated skill and safety, potentially putting the student and others at risk. Another incorrect approach is to book the test but advise the student to just try their best, and that the examiner will pass them if they are close enough. This undermines the integrity of the testing process and the NZTA standards. It suggests a lack of seriousness about the assessment and implies that the test is a mere formality rather than a rigorous evaluation of competence. This is ethically questionable and breaches the spirit of regulatory compliance. A further incorrect approach is to refuse to book the test and instead insist the student take additional lessons without clearly explaining the specific skill deficits or linking them to the NZTA test criteria. While additional lessons might be necessary, the refusal must be justified by objective performance against the test standards, not simply a blanket refusal. The instructor has a duty to guide the student towards competence, which includes clear communication about why further training is required, referencing the specific requirements of the Auckland practical driving test. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective assessment and clear communication. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements and standards, NZTA guidelines for practical driving tests in Auckland. 2. Conducting a comprehensive and objective evaluation of the student's performance against these standards. 3. providing transparent and constructive feedback to the student, outlining areas of strength and weakness with specific examples. 4. Making a recommendation regarding test readiness based on this objective assessment, clearly explaining the rationale to the student. 5. Documenting the assessment and communication with the student. This process ensures both regulatory compliance and ethical practice, safeguarding public safety and maintaining professional integrity. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that a customer applying for a driver's license in Auckland has presented a prescription for corrective lenses, but has not yet completed the required vision test to confirm their visual acuity meets the legal standards for driving in New Zealand. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing officer? Option A. Advise the applicant that the vision test must be successfully completed to the required standard before a driver's license can be issued and offer to schedule the test. Option B. Waive the vision test requirement for this applicant, given they have a prescription for corrective lenses. Option C. Accept the applicant's word that their prescription will enable them to see adequately and proceed with issuing the license. Option D. Issue the driver's license with a condition that the applicant must provide proof of passing the vision test within 14 days. Correct answer is A. Advise the applicant that the vision test must be successfully completed to the required standard before a driver's license can be issued and offer to schedule the test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the absolute necessity of ensuring road safety and adherence to New Zealand's land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017. The temptation to expedite a process for a seemingly minor infraction, especially when faced with a customer's urgency, can lead to overlooking critical safety requirements. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the licensing system and public safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the requirements of the land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017, specifically regarding the assessment of a driver's fitness and competency. This means ensuring all mandatory checks, including the vision test, are completed and passed to the required standard before issuing a license. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the regulatory framework designed to ensure that only safe and competent drivers are licensed, thereby protecting public safety on New Zealand roads. The rule mandates specific standards for vision, and failing to meet these standards, even with a corrective lens prescription, necessitates further verification or a different outcome. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that involves issuing the license based on the customer's assurance that they have a prescription for glasses, without verifying the prescription or confirming it meets the required visual acuity standards, is a regulatory failure. This bypasses the mandatory vision test requirement of the land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017, potentially licensing a driver who cannot see adequately to operate a vehicle safely. This poses a direct risk to public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to waive the vision test requirement altogether because the applicant claims they have a prescription. This is a direct contravention of the rules and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the purpose of the vision test, which is to objectively assess a driver's ability to see. Finally, an approach that involves issuing a temporary license with the understanding that the vision test will be completed later, without a clear process for follow-up and verification, is also professionally unacceptable. This creates a loophole that undermines the licensing process and could result in an unlicensed driver operating on the road for an extended period, contrary to the spirit and letter of the law. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the relevant legislation, e.g., Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. 2. Applying the rules consistently and without exception, even when faced with customer pressure. 3. Recognizing that each step in the licensing process, such as the vision test, serves a critical safety purpose. 4. Knowing when to seek clarification or escalate an issue if the standard procedure cannot be met. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a driver licensing testing officer in Auckland is presented with an applicant who claims extensive prior driving experience in another country and expresses a strong personal need to obtain a New Zealand driver's license quickly. The applicant suggests that a full practical test might be unnecessary given their background. What is the most appropriate course of action for the testing officer to ensure compliance with New Zealand's land transport rule, driver licensing, and uphold public safety? Option A. Waive certain components of the practical test, acknowledging the applicant's claimed prior experience and personal urgency to expedite the licensing process. Option B. Conduct the full practical driving test as mandated by the land transport rule, driver licensing, meticulously assessing all required skills and knowledge without deviation. Option C. Allow the applicant to guide themselves through the test, accepting their self-assessment of their driving capabilities during the evaluation. Option D. Rush through the practical test, overlooking minor errors to accommodate the applicant's stated need for a quick license, while still completing the basic requirements. The correct answer is B. Conduct the full practical driving test as mandated by the land transport rule, driver licensing, meticulously assessing all required skills and knowledge without deviation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver to obtain a license with the paramount importance of ensuring public safety on New Zealand roads. The pressure to expedite the process, potentially due to a perceived urgency by the applicant or the testing officer, can create a conflict with the strict adherence to the land transport rule, driver licensing. A testing officer must exercise sound judgment, recognizing that their role is not merely administrative but fundamentally about safeguarding the community. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a rigorous and impartial assessment of the applicant's driving skills against the established criteria outlined in the land transport rule, driver licensing. This means conducting the full practical driving test, including all required maneuvers and observations, regardless of any perceived urgency or the applicant's prior experience. The testing officer must meticulously evaluate the applicant's ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently in various traffic conditions, demonstrating a thorough understanding of road rules and defensive driving techniques. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the regulatory requirement to ensure all licensed drivers meet the minimum safety standards necessary to protect themselves and other road users, thereby fulfilling the ethical obligation to public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves waiving certain components of the practical test based on the applicant's assertion of prior experience or stated need for a license. This fails to comply with the land transport rule, driver licensing, which mandates a standardized assessment for all applicants. It introduces subjectivity and bypasses the established safety checks, potentially licensing individuals who have not demonstrated the required competency, thereby creating a significant risk to public safety. Another incorrect approach is to allow the applicant to coach themselves through the test or to accept their self-assessment of their abilities during the evaluation. The testing officer's role is to objectively assess performance, not to guide or validate the applicant's subjective experience. This approach undermines the integrity of the testing process and violates the principle of impartial evaluation, as it allows personal bias or the applicant's desire to pass to influence the outcome, rather than objective performance. A further incorrect approach is to rush through the test or to overlook minor errors due to time constraints or pressure from the applicant. The land transport rule, driver licensing, specifies the duration and scope of the practical test to ensure a comprehensive evaluation. Expediting the process or ignoring infractions compromises the thoroughness of the assessment, potentially leading to the licensing of drivers who are not fully prepared for the responsibilities of driving on New Zealand roads. This directly contravenes the regulatory intent of ensuring driver competence and road safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the land transport rule, driver licensing, maintaining professional objectivity, and resisting any external or internal pressures that might compromise the integrity of the assessment. When faced with a situation where an applicant expresses urgency or claims extensive experience, the professional should reaffirm the necessity of a complete and impartial evaluation, explaining that the test is designed to ensure everyone meets the same high safety standards for the benefit of all road users in New Zealand. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that spending extra time studying the New Zealand Road Code and practicing driving in various Auckland conditions is more time-consuming than other methods. Considering the regulatory framework for obtaining a driver's license in Auckland, which approach best aligns with the principles of responsible road usage and the intent of the licensing process. Option A. Seek advice from experienced drivers on insider tips for the test and prioritize learning only those aspects of the road code that seem most relevant to the test format. Option B. Minimize study time by relying on prior informal driving experience and only reviewing the most basic rules, hoping to pass through luck and minimal effort. Option C. Dedicate sufficient time to thoroughly study the New Zealand road code and engage in extensive practical driving practice to ensure a comprehensive understanding of road rules and safe driving techniques. Option D. Focus on memorizing answers to common test questions and practice only the specific maneuvers likely to be tested, assuming this is the most efficient way to pass. The correct answer is C. Dedicate sufficient time to thoroughly study the New Zealand road code and engage in extensive practical driving practice to ensure a comprehensive understanding of road rules and safe driving techniques. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a license in Auckland, New Zealand. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to pass the test with the ethical and legal obligation to accurately represent one's driving capabilities and understanding of road rules. Misrepresenting one's ability or knowledge, even with the perceived intention of passing, undermines the integrity of the licensing system, which is designed to ensure public safety on New Zealand roads. Careful judgment is required to navigate the pressure of the test, while adhering to principles of honesty and responsible driving. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly preparing for the Auckland driver's test by studying the official New Zealand road code, practicing driving skills in various conditions, and honestly assessing one's readiness. This approach aligns with the fundamental purpose of the licensing process, which is to verify that an applicant possesses the necessary knowledge and skills to operate a vehicle safely and in compliance with New Zealand traffic laws. By undertaking genuine preparation, the applicant demonstrates respect for the regulatory framework established by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, and upholds the ethical responsibility of a prospective road user. This ensures that the license, once obtained, is a true reflection of competence, contributing to overall road safety in Auckland. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves attempting to cram specific test questions or memorize answers without a true understanding of the underlying principles of safe driving and road rules. This fails to meet the spirit of the NZTA regulations, which aim to assess genuine comprehension and application, not rote memorization. It creates a risk of the driver being unable to react appropriately in unforeseen situations not covered by memorized answers, thereby jeopardizing public safety. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a friend or family member to coach on tricks or shortcuts to pass the test, rather than focusing on comprehensive learning of the road code and practical driving skills. This bypasses the intended learning process and can lead to a superficial understanding of safe driving practices, which is contrary to the safety objectives of the NZTA. It also implies a lack of personal commitment to becoming a responsible driver. A further incorrect approach is to downplay or ignore areas of weakness in driving skills or knowledge, hoping they won't be tested. This demonstrates a lack of self-awareness and a failure to engage with the full scope of the licensing requirements. It is ethically problematic as it involves a deliberate omission of effort in areas critical for safe driving, potentially leading to dangerous driving behaviors on Auckland's roads. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing a similar situation should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity and genuine competence. This involves 1. Understanding the purpose of the regulation. Recognize that the Auckland driver's test is a safety mechanism, not just a hurdle. 2. Self-assessment. Honestly evaluate one's strengths and weaknesses regarding driving knowledge and skills. 3. Resource utilization. Utilize official resources like the New Zealand Road Code and accredited driving instructors. 4. Ethical commitment. Commit to becoming a safe and responsible driver, not just to passing a test. 5. Long-term perspective. Understand that safe driving is a continuous learning process, and the license is the beginning, not the end, of that journey. Question 5. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern in the access logs for the Auckland Transport Driver Licensing Database, suggesting a potential unauthorized access attempt. What is the most appropriate immediate action for an Auckland transport employee who observes this alert? Option A. Attempt to investigate and resolve the access log anomaly independently using available system tools. Option B. Immediately report the anomaly to the designated Auckland Transport IT Security or Data Protection Officer. Option C. Ignore the alert, assuming it is a technical glitch or false positive, and continue with daily tasks. Option D. Discuss the observed alert with other team members who are not directly involved in IT security to seek their opinion. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the anomaly to the designated Auckland Transport IT Security or Data Protection Officer. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential breach of privacy and data security protocols, which is a professionally challenging scenario requiring careful judgment. The Auckland Transport Code of Conduct and relevant New Zealand privacy legislation, such as the Privacy Act 2020, govern how personal information is collected, used, and stored. A failure to adhere to these regulations can result in significant penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the anomaly to the designated IT Security or Data Protection Officer. This aligns with regulatory requirements for data breach notification and internal reporting procedures. The Privacy Act 2020 mandates that agencies take reasonable steps to protect personal information from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, or loss. Prompt internal reporting ensures that it can investigate the potential breach, assess the scope of any compromise, and take appropriate mitigation steps as required by law and at policy. This proactive measure demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data handling. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the alert, assuming it is a false positive. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a serious data security incident and violates the duty to protect personal information under the Privacy Act 2020. It also bypasses internal reporting mechanisms, hindering timely investigation and response. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the issue independently without consulting the relevant IT security or data protection personnel. This could inadvertently worsen the situation, compromise the integrity of the investigation, or lead to further breaches of privacy. It also circumvents established protocols designed to ensure compliance with legal obligations. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to discuss the alert with colleagues not involved in IT security or data protection. This constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of potentially sensitive information about a system anomaly, which could itself be a breach of privacy, and add internal policies regarding confidential information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes immediate reporting of potential security incidents to the appropriate internal channels. This framework involves 1. Recognizing a potential issue that could impact data security or privacy. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, e.g., Privacy Act 2020. 3. Escalating the issue to the designated authority or department responsible for handling such matters. 4. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation and following prescribed procedures. Question 6. During a practical driving test in Auckland, New Zealand, a candidate appears visibly anxious, hesitating slightly before executing a lane change and momentarily oversteering. The examiner is aware that nervousness can affect a driver's performance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to ensure a fair and accurate assessment of the candidate's driving competence? Option A. Observe the candidate's overall driving performance, noting the hesitation and oversteering as potential indicators, but continuing the test to assess their ability to recover and demonstrate safe driving practices in other situations. Option B. Offer detailed instructions and guidance on how to execute the lane change and correct the steering, effectively coaching the candidate through the maneuver. Option C. Immediately mark down the hesitation and oversteering as critical errors, as any deviation from perfect execution indicates a lack of control. Option D. Discontinue the test prematurely due to the candidate's apparent nervousness, deeming them unfit to drive based on their anxious demeanor. The correct answer is A. Observe the candidate's overall driving performance, noting the hesitation and oversteering as potential indicators, but continuing the test to assess their ability to recover and demonstrate safe driving practices in other situations. Explanation: during the evaluation of a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely in Auckland, New Zealand, A common challenge arises when a candidate exhibits nervousness that might impair their performance. This scenario is professionally challenging because the examiner must distinguish between genuine driving deficiencies and temporary anxiety-induced errors, ensuring a fair and accurate assessment. The examiner's judgment requires careful consideration of the candidate's overall driving competence versus isolated mistakes. The best approach involves the examiner maintaining a calm and encouraging demeanor, providing clear and concise instruction, and focusing on observable driving actions. This approach is correct because it aligns with the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Driving Instruction and Testing, which mandates that testing officers conduct assessments in a manner that allows candidates to demonstrate their driving skills effectively. By creating a less stressful environment, the examiner can obtain a more reliable measure of the candidate's actual driving ability, adhering to the principle of fair assessment. This method prioritizes the candidate's ability to demonstrate safe driving practices under reasonable conditions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately penalize any hesitation or minor error stemming from nervousness. This fails to acknowledge that anxiety is a common factor for many test takers and can lead to temporary lapses in judgment or execution that do not reflect a fundamental lack of driving skill. Such an approach could lead to an unfair failure, contradicting the spirit of the testing regulations which aim to assess competence, not the ability to perform under extreme pressure. Another incorrect approach is to overlook significant driving errors because the candidate appears nervous. While empathy is important, the primary responsibility of the examiner is to ensure public safety by only licensing competent drivers. Ignoring critical mistakes, even if attributed to nerves, compromises this duty and violates the core principles of the testing regime. A further incorrect approach is to offer excessive reassurance or coaching during the test. While some encouragement is appropriate, providing detailed guidance on how to perform specific maneuvers during the test itself crosses the line into instruction, which is not the role of the testing officer. This would invalidate the test as a measure of independent driving competence and would not be in line with the regulatory framework for independent assessment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective observation of driving behavior, adherence to established testing protocols, and a balanced consideration of potential external factors like nervousness. This involves understanding the nuances of the testing criteria, maintaining professional detachment while remaining approachable, and making judgments based on the totality of the candidate's performance, not just isolated incidents. Question 7. What factors determine a driver's appropriate response when lawfully stopped by a police officer on a public road in Auckland, New Zealand? Option A. Remaining calm and polite, complying with lawful directions to stop and provide identification, and politely seeking clarification on the reason for the stop. Option B. Immediately questioning the officer's authority and demanding to know the specific traffic violation before stopping. Option C. Attempting to drive away from the scene to avoid interaction with the police officer. Option D. Offering unsolicited explanations for potential minor driving errors before the officer has stated the reason for the stop. The correct answer is A. Remaining calm and polite, complying with lawful directions to stop and provide identification, and politely seeking clarification on the reason for the stop. Explanation. The scenario of a driver encountering a police officer during a routine traffic stop in Auckland, New Zealand, presents a professionally challenging situation due to the inherent power dynamic and the driver's legal obligations. The driver must navigate the interaction with respect for the law and the officer's authority, while also understanding their rights. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with New Zealand road rules and police procedures without inadvertently admitting guilt or compromising their position. The best approach involves remaining calm, polite, and cooperative while clearly stating the intention to understand the reason for the stop and to comply with lawful directions. This approach is correct because it aligns with the New Zealand Land Transport Act 1998 and associated regulations, which mandate drivers to stop when signaled by a police officer and to provide their driver's license and vehicle particulars upon request. It also upholds the ethical principle of respecting lawful authority and fostering a positive interaction with law enforcement. By seeking clarification politely, the driver demonstrates an understanding of their obligations without preemptively admitting fault. An incorrect approach would be to immediately become defensive and question the officer's authority or the legality of the stop, without first complying with the basic requirement to stop and identify oneself. could be interpreted as obstruction or a lack of cooperation, potentially escalating the situation and leading to further penalties under New Zealand law. Another incorrect approach would be to offer unsolicited explanations or excuses for potential minor infractions before being asked, which could be misconstrued and may not address the actual reason for the stop. Finally, attempting to leave the scene without explicit permission from the officer is a serious offense under New Zealand law and would have severe legal consequences. Professionals should approach such situations by first recalling their fundamental legal obligations as a road user in New Zealand. This involves understanding the duty to stop and identify oneself. Subsequently, they should focus on maintaining a respectful and calm demeanor, actively listening to the officer's instructions, and politely seeking clarification if needed. The decision-making process should prioritize compliance with legal requirements while protecting one's rights through clear and respectful communication. Question 8. Quality control measures reveal that a driving instructor in Auckland, New Zealand, is consistently passing students who demonstrate only a superficial understanding of road rules and hazard perception, often by focusing on specific test routes rather than comprehensive safe driving skills. Which approach best upholds the instructor's professional and regulatory obligations under the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017? Option A. Rely primarily on the student's self-reported confidence and readiness for the test, without extensive independent evaluation. Option B. Thoroughly assess the student's ability to drive safely and competently in various conditions, ensuring they can independently identify and respond to hazards in accordance with the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. Option C. Prioritize passing students quickly to maintain a high pass rate, even if it means teaching only the minimum required skills for the test. Option D. Focus on teaching students the specific test routes and common examiner questions to maximize their chances of passing the practical driving test. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly assess the student's ability to drive safely and competently in various conditions, ensuring they can independently identify and respond to hazards in accordance with the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Auckland, New Zealand, by requiring them to balance the immediate need to pass a student with the overarching responsibility of ensuring road safety and adherence to the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. The instructor must navigate the ethical dilemma of potentially compromising safety standards for expediency, which could have serious consequences for the student, other road users, and the instructor's professional standing. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the licensing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the student's readiness based on the New Zealand Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, specifically focusing on the demonstration of safe driving behaviors and hazard perception. This approach prioritizes the student's ability to drive safely and competently in real-world conditions, as mandated by the rule, rather than solely focusing on passing the test. The instructor must ensure the student can independently identify and respond to hazards, understand and apply traffic laws, and demonstrate control of the vehicle in various situations, as outlined in the practical driving test requirements. This aligns with the ethical duty of care owed to the student and the public. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves pressuring the student to pass the test even if they are not fully competent, by focusing on memorizing specific test routes and common examiner questions without ensuring genuine understanding and application of safe driving principles. This fails to meet the requirements of the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which mandates a demonstration of safe driving ability, not just test-taking skills. It also breaches the ethical obligation to ensure the student is a safe driver. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on the student's self-assessment of their readiness, without conducting objective, comprehensive evaluations against the criteria set out in the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. This overlooks the instructor's professional responsibility to provide an unbiased assessment and could lead to a license being issued to an unprepared driver, compromising public safety. A further incorrect approach is to teach the student only the minimum required skills to pass the test, neglecting to equip them with the broader defensive driving techniques and hazard anticipation skills necessary for long-term safe driving. This approach, while seemingly efficient for the test, fails to adequately prepare the student for the complexities and unpredictability of actual road conditions, thereby contravening the spirit and intent of the licensing regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the relevant legislation, in this case, the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. 2. Conducting thorough and objective assessments of the individual's competency against these requirements. 3. Prioritizing ethical obligations, such as the duty of care, over expediency or external pressures. 4. Maintaining professional integrity by refusing to compromise standards, even if it means delaying a positive outcome for the individual. Question 9. The control framework reveals that Mr. Henderson, a known acquaintance of the testing officer, is applying for a learner's license in Auckland, New Zealand. The testing officer is concerned about Mr. Henderson's apparent nervousness and his limited familiarity with the New Zealand Road Code. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with the Land Transport Rule, driver licensing, and ethical assessment standards? Option A. Adjust the difficulty of the questions to accommodate Mr. Henderson's nervousness, aiming to ensure he passes the assessment. Option B. Conduct a thorough assessment of Mr. Henderson's knowledge of the New Zealand Road Code, objectively scoring his responses against the established criteria for a learner license. Option C. Assume Mr. Henderson's competence due to their acquaintance and proceed with a simplified assessment, offering guidance where needed. Option D. Delegate the assessment of Mr. Henderson's knowledge to a colleague due to the testing officer's busy schedule. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough assessment of Mr. Henderson's knowledge of the New Zealand Road Code, objectively scoring his responses against the established criteria for a learner license. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a driver applicant, Mr. Henderson, is seeking to obtain a learner's license in Auckland, New Zealand. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the assessment process strictly adheres to the Land Transport Rule, driver licensing, and the NZ Transport Agency, NZTA, guidelines for learner license testing, while also upholding ethical standards of fairness and integrity. This requires the testing officer to meticulously evaluate the applicant's knowledge and understanding of road rules and safe driving practices, without succumbing to external pressures or personal biases. The best professional approach involves the testing officer conducting a comprehensive assessment of Mr. Henderson's knowledge of the New Zealand Road Code, as mandated by the Land Transport Rule, driver licensing. This includes asking a range of questions covering traffic laws, road signs, and safe driving behaviors relevant to New Zealand conditions. The officer must then objectively score the responses against the established criteria, ensuring that Mr. Henderson demonstrates the required level of competency to proceed to the next stage of licensing. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the regulatory requirement to assess an applicant's understanding of the road code before issuing a learner license, ensuring public safety on New Zealand roads. It upholds the ethical principle of impartiality by relying solely on the applicant's demonstrated knowledge and not on any personal relationship or external influence. An incorrect approach would be for the testing officer to assume Mr. Henderson's competence based on their acquaintance and to skip certain sections of the assessment or to provide hints. This fails to comply with the Land Transport Rule, driver licensing, which mandates a standardized and thorough assessment for all applicants. Ethically, this constitutes a breach of integrity and fairness, as it provides an unfair advantage to Mr. Henderson and compromises the safety of other road users. Another incorrect approach would be for the testing officer to become overly focused on the applicant's perceived nervousness and to adjust the difficulty of the questions to make it easier for him to pass. While empathy is important, the assessment must objectively measure knowledge against the required standard. Deviating from the established assessment criteria, as outlined by the NZTA, undermines the validity of the learner license and potentially places an inadequately prepared driver on the road, violating the core purpose of the licensing system. A further incorrect approach would be for the testing officer to delegate the assessment of Mr. Henderson's knowledge to another colleague simply because they are busy. The responsibility for conducting the learner license assessment rests solely with the designated testing officer. Delegating this duty without proper authorization or oversight would violate NZTA procedures and the Land Transport Rule, potentially leading to an unreliable assessment and compromising the integrity of the licensing process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the relevant legislation and guidelines, maintaining objectivity throughout the process, and making decisions based on evidence and established criteria. When faced with potential conflicts of interest or external pressures, professionals must adhere to their professional obligations and seek guidance if unsure, ensuring that their actions uphold the integrity of their role and the safety of the public. Question 10. Process analysis reveals that a driver applicant in Auckland, New Zealand, needs to demonstrate an understanding of safe stopping distances. If a vehicle is traveling at 50 km/h on a dry asphalt road with a coefficient of friction of 0.7 and the driver's reaction time is 1.5 seconds, what is the total stopping distance in meters, assuming the acceleration due to gravity is 9.8 m/s2? Option A, approximately 14.06 meters. Option B, approximately 34.90 meters. Option C, approximately 20.84 meters. Option D, approximately 45.00 meters. The correct answer is B, approximately 34.90 meters. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a license in Auckland, New Zealand. The core difficulty lies in accurately calculating the required stopping distance under specific conditions, which directly impacts road safety and compliance with New Zealand's Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Miscalculation can lead to an inability to demonstrate safe driving practices, potentially resulting in a failed test and a lack of understanding of critical safety principles. Careful judgment is required to apply the correct formula and interpret the results within the context of the Auckland road environment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves correctly applying the formula for calculating stopping distance, which is a fundamental aspect of safe driving and is implicitly assessed during the Auckland driver's test. This formula, derived from physics principles and codified in road safety guidelines, accounts for reaction time and braking distance. The correct approach is to use the provided speed and a standard reaction time to determine the total stopping distance. Specifically, the formula for stopping distance is stopping distance equals reaction distance plus braking distance, where reaction distance equals speed m/s, asterisk reaction time s, braking distance equals backslash frac speed 22 asterisk backslash mu asterisk g backslash. Here, backslash mu backslash is the coefficient of friction between the tires and the road surface, and backslash g backslash is the acceleration due to gravity, approximately 9.8 m/s2. For this scenario, assuming a typical reaction time of 1.5 seconds and a coefficient of friction of 0.7 for dry asphalt, the calculation would proceed as follows. First, convert the speed from km/h to m/s. Speed m/s equals speed km/h/3. 6 speed m/s equals 50 km/h/3. 6 equals 13.89 m/s. Approximately reaction distance equals 13.89 m/s asterisk 1. 5s equals 20.84 meters. Braking distance equals backslash frac 13.89 m/s 22 asterisk 0. 7 asterisk 9. 8 m/s2 backslash equals backslash frac 192. 93 m2/s2 13. 72 m/s2 backslash equals 14.06 meters. Approximately total stopping distance equals 20.84 meters plus 14.06 meters equals 34.90 meters. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the underlying physics of vehicle stopping, which is crucial for understanding safe following distances and emergency braking scenarios. As expected in the Auckland driver's test, it demonstrates an understanding of the factors influencing stopping distance and the ability to apply mathematical principles to a real-world driving situation, aligning with the safety objectives of the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, and the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply estimate the stopping distance without performing any calculations or considering the specific variables. This fails to demonstrate a quantitative understanding of stopping distances and relies on subjective judgment, which can be unreliable and unsafe. It disregards the need for precise application of road safety principles. Another incorrect approach would be to only calculate the braking distance and neglect the reaction distance. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because reaction time is a critical component of total stopping distance. Failing to account for it would lead to an underestimation of the distance required to stop safely, increasing the risk of collisions. A further incorrect approach would be to use an incorrect or simplified formula that does not accurately reflect the physics of stopping, such as using a linear relationship between speed and stopping distance, or omitting the coefficient of friction. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the principles of vehicle dynamics and road safety, which is unacceptable for a licensed driver. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such calculations by first identifying the relevant regulatory framework, in this case, New Zealand's Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004, and associated NZTA guidelines. They should then break down the problem into its constituent parts, reaction distance and braking distance, identify the necessary variables speed, reaction time, coefficient of friction, gravity, and apply the appropriate mathematical formulas. A critical step is to ensure all units are consistent before performing calculations. Finally, the calculated result should be interpreted in the context of safe driving practices, understanding that these calculations represent minimum safe distances under ideal conditions, and that real-world conditions may require even greater distances. Question 11. System analysis indicates that a driver approaching a signalized intersection in Auckland, New Zealand, intends to turn right. The traffic signal is showing a green light. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant action for the driver to take? Option A. Proceed with the right turn immediately as the green light indicates an unconditional right-of-way. Option B. Wait for a clear path, ensuring no oncoming traffic or pedestrians are lawfully in the intersection before proceeding with the right turn. Option C. Assume that oncoming traffic will stop for the right turn and proceed without further checks. Option D. Hesitate significantly to ensure absolute certainty, potentially causing a traffic jam. The correct answer is B. Wait for a clear path, ensuring no oncoming traffic or pedestrians are lawfully in the intersection before proceeding with the right turn. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to interpret and apply the specific rules of the road in Auckland, New Zealand, particularly concerning right-hand turns at intersections with traffic signals. Misinterpreting these rules can lead to dangerous situations, traffic violations, and potential accidents. The driver must demonstrate not only knowledge of the rules, but also the ability to apply them in a real-time, dynamic environment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves understanding and adhering to the New Zealand Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004, specifically regarding turning at intersections. This rule dictates that when turning right at a signalized intersection, a driver must yield to oncoming traffic and pedestrians lawfully in the intersection. Therefore, waiting for a clear path, even if the signal is green, is the correct and safest action. This approach aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety, which prioritizes the prevention of collisions and the protection of all road users. It directly addresses the requirement to give way to oncoming traffic and pedestrians, as mandated by the regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the turn immediately upon seeing a green light without checking for oncoming traffic or pedestrians is a direct violation of the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004. This failure to yield creates a significant risk of a head-on collision with oncoming vehicles or a collision with pedestrians who may be lawfully crossing. It demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and a disregard for the safety of others. Assuming that a green light grants unconditional right-of-way for a right turn, without considering other road users, is also a regulatory failure. Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004 clearly outlines the conditions under which a green light permits a turn, which always includes the obligation to give way to those already in the intersection or approaching. This assumption can lead to dangerous maneuvers and potential accidents. Hesitating excessively and causing a significant traffic obstruction without a clear reason, while not directly causing an immediate collision, can still be problematic. However, in the context of a right turn at a signalized intersection, the primary regulatory failure is the failure to yield safely. While unnecessary hesitation can disrupt traffic flow, the immediate danger lies in not giving way correctly. The priority is always safety and adherence to give-way rules. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first recalling the fundamental principles of road safety and the specific give-way rules applicable in Auckland, New Zealand, as outlined in the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. They should then assess the intersection environment, identifying all potential hazards, including oncoming traffic, pedestrians, and cyclists. The decision-making process should prioritize safety and compliance with regulations, ensuring that any maneuver is executed only when it is safe to do so, and all relevant give-way obligations have been met. This involves a continuous cycle of observation, assessment, and decisive, safe action. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that Auckland Council's road safety team is considering a proposal to reduce the speed limit on a busy residential street based on feedback from a vocal community group. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach for the Council to adopt in this situation, adhering to the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004? Option A. Rely solely on the community group's petition and anecdotal evidence to justify the speed limit reduction, bypassing the formal assessment and consultation requirements of the rule. Option B. Maintain the current speed limit, as no formal accident data has been presented that definitively proves the existing limit is unsafe. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the street's traffic volume, accident history, road geometry, and pedestrian activity, and initiate the formal consultation process as outlined in the Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004, before proposing any speed limit change. Option D. Implement the speed limit reduction immediately to address community concerns, with a plan to conduct the necessary technical assessments and consultations retrospectively. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the street's traffic volume, accident history, road geometry, and pedestrian activity, and initiate the formal consultation process as outlined in the Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004, before proposing any speed limit change. Explanation. Governance review demonstrates a need for enhanced understanding of the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004, and its implications for Auckland Council's road safety initiatives. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the Council's statutory obligations under the Land Transport Act 1998 and the specific speed limit rules with the practical realities of community consultation and the need for evidence-based decision-making. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to the regulatory framework can lead to ineffective safety measures, public dissatisfaction, and potential legal challenges. The best approach involves a thorough review of the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004, focusing on the Council's specific responsibilities for identifying, proposing, and implementing speed limit changes. This includes understanding the criteria for setting speed limits, the requirement for consultation with affected parties, and the need for supporting evidence such as traffic volume, accident data, and road geometry. The Council must then develop a proposal that demonstrably aligns with these rules, ensuring that any proposed speed limit changes are justified by safety considerations and are implemented through the correct administrative processes. This aligns with the Council's duty to promote road safety and manage the road network effectively, as mandated by the Land Transport Act 1998 and its associated rules. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize community pressure or anecdotal evidence over the requirements of the Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004. For instance, implementing a speed limit reduction solely based on a petition from a small group of residents, without undertaking the necessary technical assessments and formal consultation processes outlined in the rule, would be a regulatory failure. This bypasses the established procedures designed to ensure that speed limit changes are evidence-based and consider all relevant factors, potentially leading to inappropriate speed limits that do not enhance safety or could even create new hazards. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that existing speed limits are always appropriate and to resist any review or change. The Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2004, mandates a proactive approach to speed management, requiring councils to periodically review speed limits and make changes where necessary to improve safety. Failing to conduct these reviews or to consider new evidence that suggests a speed limit is no longer appropriate would be a breach of the Council's responsibilities. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to implement speed limit changes without proper public notification and consultation, as required by the rule. This procedural failure undermines transparency and public trust, and it means that the Council has not adequately considered the views of those affected by the proposed changes, which is a key component of effective governance and regulatory compliance in New Zealand. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing legislation and rules. This involves identifying the specific obligations and procedures required. Next, they should gather all necessary data and evidence to support any proposed action. This should be followed by a robust consultation process with all relevant stakeholders, ensuring their feedback is considered. Finally, decisions must be documented and justified, demonstrating compliance with all regulatory requirements. Question 13. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the regulatory framework governing driver licensing in Auckland, New Zealand. If a potential driver claims to possess a valid license but has recently moved from another country and is awaiting their New Zealand license, what is the most compliant and professionally responsible course of action to ensure adherence to the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017? Option A. Contact the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, to verify the current status and validity of the driver's license. Option B. Accept the driver's verbal confirmation of holding a valid license and proceed with their employment. Option C. Assume the driver's previous international driving experience is sufficient for operating a vehicle in Auckland. Option D. Rely on the driver's possession of an expired international driving permit as proof of their eligibility. The correct answer is A. Contact the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, to verify the current status and validity of the driver's license. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape to ensure compliance and safe operation. In Auckland, New Zealand, the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017 governs the requirements for obtaining and holding a driver's license. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves balancing the immediate need for a driver to operate a vehicle with the absolute requirement to adhere to the legal framework for licensing. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to significant legal consequences for both the driver and any entity employing or facilitating their driving. The best approach involves verifying the validity of the driver's license against the official records maintained by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA. This directly aligns with the regulatory requirement that any person driving a motor vehicle on a New Zealand road must hold a current and appropriate driver license. By confirming the license's status through official channels, an individual or organization ensures they are not contravening the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. This proactive verification demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to legal compliance, mitigating risks associated with employing or allowing an unlicensed individual to drive. An incorrect approach would be to accept the driver's verbal assurance of having a valid license. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence required by law and ethical practice. The Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017 places the onus on the driver to hold a valid license, but it also implies a responsibility for those who might engage their services as drivers to ensure they are legally permitted to do so. Relying solely on a verbal statement bypasses the necessary verification process and could inadvertently lead to facilitating unlicensed driving, which is a serious offense. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the driver possesses a physical license card, it is automatically valid. License cards can expire, be suspended, or be revoked for various reasons. The physical card is merely evidence of a license, not proof of its current validity. The regulatory framework necessitates checking the live status of the license, not just its existence. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to proceed with the assumption that the driver's previous employment history as a driver automatically qualifies them to drive in Auckland without a current, valid license. While experience is valuable, it does not substitute for the legal requirement of holding a current driver license as stipulated by the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. Each instance of driving requires a valid license at that specific time. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and risk mitigation. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant legal requirements, in this case, the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. 2. establishing clear internal procedures for verifying critical compliance elements, such as driver's license validity. 3. Implementing these procedures consistently for all relevant personnel. 4. Seeking official confirmation rather than relying on self-reporting or assumptions. 5. Documenting all verification steps taken. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that a driver approaching an uncontrolled intersection in Auckland encounters another vehicle also arriving at the same time. Both vehicles are on roads of equal importance. What is the safest and most legally compliant action to take? Option A. Honk the horn to signal intent to proceed. Option B. Attempt to enter the intersection first to establish priority. Option C. Yield to the vehicle approaching from the right. Option D. Proceed through the intersection assuming the other driver will yield. The correct answer is C. Yield to the vehicle approaching from the right. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for new drivers in Auckland, understanding the nuances of right-of-way at uncontrolled intersections. This scenario is professionally challenging because a driver's interpretation of right-of-way directly impacts road safety, potentially leading to collisions if misapplied. Careful judgment is required to navigate these situations predictably and safely, adhering to the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. The best approach involves yielding to vehicles already in the intersection or those approaching from the right if both vehicles arrive simultaneously. This aligns with the fundamental principle of maintaining a safe and orderly flow of traffic, as stipulated by the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, specifically regarding priority at intersections. This rule prioritizes predictability and minimizes ambiguity, thereby reducing the risk of accidents. Approaching the intersection and proceeding without clear indication of who has priority, or assuming priority based on vehicle type, demonstrates a failure to comply with the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. This creates a dangerous situation by introducing unpredictability and increasing the likelihood of a collision. Similarly, attempting to rush through the intersection to assert priority, even if technically arriving first, disregards the rule's emphasis on safety and yielding when necessary. This action prioritizes personal expediency over the collective safety of all road users. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the intersection type and any traffic control devices. 2. Assessing the presence and proximity of other vehicles. 3. Applying the relevant rules of the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, particularly those concerning right-of-way at uncontrolled intersections. 4. Making a clear, decisive action that prioritizes safety and predictability, even if it means yielding. Question 15. Operational review demonstrates that a learner driver in Auckland, New Zealand, has indicated to their instructor that they have accumulated significantly more supervised driving hours than they have actually completed, stating they believe this will help them pass their upcoming practical driving test. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Advise the learner on techniques to convincingly portray greater experience during the test, without directly contradicting their stated hours. Option B. Immediately report the learner's statement to the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, as a potential attempt to defraud the testing process. Option C. Proceed with instruction as planned, without mentioning the learner's statement, assuming the testing officer will assess actual skill regardless of reported hours. Option D. Discuss the learner's statement directly with them, explaining the importance of accurately representing their experience and focusing on developing genuine competency for the test. The correct answer is D. Discuss the learner's statement directly with them, explaining the importance of accurately representing their experience and focusing on developing genuine competency for the test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Auckland, New Zealand, concerning the ethical and regulatory implications of a learner driver's potential misrepresentation of their driving experience. The instructor must balance the need to prepare the learner for the practical driving test with the obligation to uphold the integrity of the testing process and ensure public safety. Failure to address the situation appropriately could lead to the learner failing the test, potentially facing penalties, or worse, being inadequately prepared for independent driving, posing a risk on Auckland's roads. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves directly addressing the learner's stated experience with honesty and clarity, while reinforcing the requirements of the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, driving instruction. This approach involves the instructor explaining that, while they can provide instruction and guidance, the learner is ultimately responsible for accurately representing their readiness and experience to the testing officer. The instructor should emphasize that the purpose of the test is to assess actual competency, not just the duration of practice. This aligns with the ethical duty of a driving instructor to foster safe and responsible drivers and adheres to the spirit of the Land Transport Rule, which mandates that instruction should lead to a competent and safe driver. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves ignoring the learner's statement and proceeding with instruction as if no discrepancy was mentioned. This fails to address the potential for misrepresentation and neglects the instructor's ethical responsibility to ensure the learner understands the importance of honesty in the testing process. It also risks the learner entering the test unprepared to truthfully answer questions about their experience, potentially leading to immediate disqualification or a failed test. Another incorrect approach is to immediately report the learner to the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, without first discussing the matter with the learner. This is an overly punitive response that bypasses the opportunity for constructive dialogue and education. While reporting is an option if the learner persists in their intent to misrepresent, it should not be the first step. It undermines the instructor-learner relationship and fails to address the root cause of the learner's perceived need to exaggerate their experience. A further incorrect approach is to agree to coach the learner specifically on how to appear more experienced during the test, without addressing the underlying issue of actual competency. This directly facilitates deception and violates the instructor's ethical obligation to prepare the learner for safe driving, not just for passing a test through dishonest means. It also contravenes the principles of fair assessment inherent in the NZTA testing regime. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and learner development. This involves 1. Active listening and understanding the learner's perspective. 2. Direct, honest, and constructive communication regarding the discrepancy and its implications. 3. Reinforcing the importance of integrity and safety in driving. 4. Providing appropriate instruction to build genuine competency. 5. Escalating concerns only if the learner remains unwilling to engage ethically or demonstrates a lack of actual competence. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that Auckland Transport is considering a proposal to reduce the speed limit on a busy arterial road. To expedite the process and address immediate safety concerns, a senior manager suggests proceeding with the change based on a recent community petition and bypassing the full public consultation outlined in the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Setting of speed limits 2004. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the speed limit reduction based on the senior manager's recommendation, relying on anecdotal evidence of safety issues and the perceived urgency, without extensive data analysis or formal consultation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of traffic and safety data for the road. Formally propose the speed limit change according to the procedures in the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Setting of speed limits 2004, and undertake the mandatory public consultation process before implementation. Option C. Implement the speed limit reduction immediately based on the community petition, as it reflects public demand for improved safety, and address any procedural requirements retrospectively. Option D. Implement the speed limit reduction and inform the public through social media channels, considering this sufficient notification without formal consultation, as per the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Setting of speed limits 2004. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of traffic and safety data for the road, formally propose the speed limit change according to the procedures in the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Setting of speed limits 2004, and undertake the mandatory public consultation process before implementation. Explanation. Governance review demonstrates a need for enhanced understanding of the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, setting of speed limits 2004, and its implications for Auckland's road safety initiatives. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the practicalities of implementing speed limit changes with the strict legal requirements and public consultation processes mandated by the rule. Misinterpreting or neglecting these requirements can lead to legal challenges, public distrust, and ultimately, Compromised road safety outcomes. The best approach involves a thorough review of the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, setting of speed limits 2004, specifically focusing on the procedural requirements for proposing and implementing speed limit changes in Auckland. This includes understanding the criteria for determining appropriate speed limits, the necessity for robust traffic and safety data analysis, and the mandatory public consultation process. Adhering to these steps ensures that any proposed speed limit changes are legally sound, evidence-based, and have considered community input, thereby fulfilling the regulatory obligations and promoting effective road safety. An approach that bypasses the formal public consultation process, even with the intention of expediting safety improvements, is a significant regulatory failure. The Land Transport Rule, setting of speed limits 2004, explicitly mandates public consultation to ensure transparency and allow affected parties to voice concerns or provide relevant information. Failing to do so undermines the democratic principles of regulation and can render the speed limit change legally invalid. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few stakeholders without conducting the required traffic and safety data analysis. The rule requires speed limits to be based on objective criteria and data, not subjective opinions. Ignoring this requirement leads to decisions that may not be evidence-based and could potentially be challenged on grounds of being arbitrary or not serving the intended purpose of improving road safety. Finally, implementing speed limit changes without proper signage and public notification is a failure to comply with the practical implementation requirements of the rule. Even if the procedural steps are followed, inadequate communication of the new speed limits to the public can lead to confusion, non-compliance, and potentially increased risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and strict adherence to the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, setting of speed limits 2004. This involves a systematic process of data gathering, analysis, proposal development, comprehensive public consultation, and finally, proper implementation and communication of any approved changes. When faced with potential conflicts between expediency and regulatory compliance, the regulatory framework must always take precedence. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a pattern of repeated minor traffic infringements by a delivery driver operating within Auckland. Considering the potential for escalating risks and regulatory implications under Auckland transport bylaws, which of the following actions best addresses this situation? Option A. Terminate the driver's employment immediately due to the identified risk, without further discussion or investigation. Option B. Issue an immediate final written warning to the driver, citing the risk matrix as justification for severe disciplinary action. Option C. Overlook the infringements, assuming they are minor and unlikely to lead to significant issues for the company. Option D. Conduct a formal documented meeting with the driver to discuss the infringement pattern, understand potential causes, reiterate expectations for safe driving as per Auckland transport bylaws, and outline consequences for continued noncompliance. The correct answer is D. Conduct a formal documented meeting with the driver to discuss the infringement pattern, understand potential causes, reiterate expectations for safe driving as per Auckland transport bylaws, and outline consequences for continued noncompliance. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for significant financial loss due to a driver's repeated minor infringements. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to maintain operational efficiency and customer satisfaction with the long-term imperative of ensuring road safety and regulatory compliance in Auckland. A driver's consistent disregard for traffic rules, even if seemingly minor, can escalate into more serious incidents, leading to accidents, vehicle damage, insurance claims, and potential legal liabilities for the company. The decision-maker must assess the severity of the infringements, the driver's attitude towards safety, and the potential impact on the business. The best approach involves a structured, documented conversation with the driver, clearly outlining the observed pattern of infringements, referencing the Auckland transport bylaws and the company's internal safety policy. This conversation should aim to understand the root cause of the infringements, provide specific feedback on the breaches, and establish clear expectations for future driving behavior. It should also involve outlining the consequences of continued noncompliance, which may include further disciplinary action up to and including termination, as per employment agreements and relevant New Zealand employment law. This approach is correct because it is proactive, addresses the issue directly with the individual, and aligns with the principles of natural justice and fair process, while also fulfilling the company's duty of care and regulatory obligations under the Land Transport Act 1998 and Auckland Transport's bylaws. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the pattern, assuming the infringements are too minor to warrant intervention. This fails to acknowledge the cumulative risk and neglects the company's responsibility to promote safe driving practices among its employees, potentially violating the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015. Another incorrect approach is to immediately issue a final written warning without a prior documented discussion. This bypasses the opportunity to understand the driver's perspective, offer support or retraining, and could be seen as procedurally unfair, potentially leading to employment disputes. Finally, dismissing the driver solely based on the risk matrix without any direct communication or opportunity for improvement is also an unacceptable approach, as it lacks due process and fails to consider mitigating factors or the possibility of corrective action. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes a fair and transparent process. This involves gathering all relevant information, infringement records, company policies, conducting a direct and open conversation with the employee, assessing the situation holistically, and then implementing a proportionate course of action that includes clear communication of expectations and consequences, while ensuring compliance with all applicable New Zealand legislation and Auckland transport regulations. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows that during a practical driving test in Auckland, an examiner needs to instruct the applicant to perform a specific maneuver. Considering the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 1999 and NZTA guidelines, which of the following instructional approaches best upholds the integrity of the assessment and ensures the applicant's competency is accurately evaluated? Option A. The examiner clearly states the maneuver required, for example, please perform a parallel park on the left side of the road, and then observes the applicant's execution without further verbal input unless safety is compromised. Option B. The examiner asks a leading question to prompt the maneuver such as, there's a small gap there, can you pull into it? Option C. The examiner provides detailed step-by-step instructions for the maneuver, guiding the applicant through each action. Option D. The examiner offers positive reinforcement and commentary during the maneuver, like, that's looking good, keep going. The correct answer is A. The examiner clearly states the maneuver required, for example, please perform a parallel park on the left side of the road, and then observes the applicant's execution without further verbal input unless safety is compromised. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that assessing a driver's understanding of road rules and safe driving practices is paramount for public safety in Auckland. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the need for thorough assessment with the practical constraints of a driving test, while strictly adhering to the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 1999, and associated NZTA guidelines. The examiner must ensure the applicant demonstrates competency without introducing undue stress or ambiguity. The best approach involves the examiner clearly and concisely stating the maneuver required, providing a single, unambiguous instruction, and then observing the applicant's execution without further verbal intervention unless absolutely necessary for safety. This aligns with the regulatory requirement to assess the applicant's ability to operate the vehicle independently and safely in typical driving conditions. NZTA guidelines emphasize objective assessment based on observable actions, and this method ensures the applicant is tested on their learned skills, not their ability to interpret complex or leading questions. An incorrect approach would be to provide leading instructions, such as asking, you see that gap in the traffic, can you fit in there? This is problematic as it suggests a desired outcome and may prompt the applicant to take a risk they might not otherwise consider, compromising the integrity of the assessment. It also fails to test the applicant's independent judgment in assessing traffic gaps. Another incorrect approach is to provide overly detailed, step-by-step instructions for a maneuver like parallel parking. This undermines the purpose of the test, which is to evaluate the applicant's ability to perform the maneuver based on their training and understanding of the vehicle's dimensions and spatial awareness. It essentially guides the applicant through the task, rather than assessing their competency. Finally, an incorrect approach is to offer encouragement or commentary during the maneuver, such as, good, you're doing well. While seemingly helpful, This can distract the applicant and influence their performance in ways that are not part of the objective assessment criteria. The focus must remain on the applicant's actions and adherence to road rules. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to regulatory guidelines, objective assessment, and the safety of all road users. This involves understanding the intent of the assessment, anticipating potential ambiguities, and consistently applying standardized procedures. When faced with a situation requiring instruction, the examiner should ask, is this instruction clear, unambiguous, and does it allow the applicant to demonstrate their independent skill according to the rules? Question 19. Analysis of a scenario on a busy Auckland street. A driver observes a pedestrian collapse on the side of the road, appearing to be in distress. The driver is concerned but also aware of the traffic flow and the potential for causing a disruption. Considering the New Zealand Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 and the general principles of the New Zealand Road Code, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the driver? Option A. Safely pull over to the side of the road, activate hazard lights, and then assess how to best assist the pedestrian, which may include calling emergency services. Option B. Immediately stop the vehicle in the middle of the lane to provide direct assistance to the pedestrian. Option C. Continue driving without stopping, assuming someone else will offer help or that it is not the driver's responsibility. Option D. Stop the vehicle and attempt to move the pedestrian to a safer location before assessing their condition. The correct answer is A. Safely pull over to the side of the road, activate hazard lights, and then assess how to best assist the pedestrian, which may include calling emergency services. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance adherence to traffic laws with the immediate need to assist a person in distress. The driver must make a rapid judgment call that prioritizes safety and legal compliance while acknowledging a humanitarian concern. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of the New Zealand Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 and the Road Code regarding emergency situations and the duty of care. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves stopping safely and legally, then assessing the situation to determine the appropriate course of action. This approach aligns with the New Zealand Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, which mandates drivers to stop if they are involved in or witness an accident, and to render assistance if possible. It also reflects the ethical obligation to help others in need, provided it does not create further danger. The driver should pull over to a safe location, away from traffic, activate hazard lights, and then approach the person to offer assistance or call emergency services if necessary. This prioritizes the safety of all road users and fulfills the driver's legal and moral responsibilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately stopping in the middle of the road to assist. This is a significant regulatory failure as it creates an immediate hazard to other road users, potentially causing further accidents. The Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 emphasizes safe stopping procedures, and stopping abruptly in a traffic lane is a direct contravention. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation and continue driving. While the driver is not directly involved in an accident, witnessing someone in distress and failing to offer reasonable assistance, especially when it can be done safely, could be seen as a failure of the general duty of care expected of road users. The Road Code implicitly encourages responsible behavior towards fellow road users. A further incorrect approach is to stop, but then attempt to move the injured person without assessing their condition. This could exacerbate injuries, particularly if there is a suspected spinal injury. The priority should be to call for professional medical help first, rather than attempting untrained first aid that could cause harm. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legal compliance, and ethical considerations. In situations involving potential emergencies on the road, the process should involve 1. Ensuring personal safety and the safety of other road users by finding a safe stopping location. 2. Assessing the situation from a safe distance if possible. 3. Taking immediate action to alert emergency services if required. 4. Offering assistance within one's capabilities and without causing further harm. 5. Always adhering to the specific regulations of the jurisdiction. In this case, New Zealand's Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 and the Road Code. Question 20. The review process indicates that a 68-year-old Auckland resident is renewing their standard Class 1 driver's license for a 10-year term. The current fee schedule, as derived from the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999, states that the fee for a 10-year Class 1 license renewal for individuals under 70 years of age is $125.50. If the applicant were 70 years or older, the fee for a 10-year renewal would be $80.00, and for individuals over 80, the renewal period is limited to 2 years at a fee of $20.00 per year. What is the correct total renewal fee for this applicant? Option A, $80.00. Option B, $200.00. Option C, $125.50. Option D, $125.00. Correct answer is C, $125.50. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential discrepancy in the calculation of a driver's license renewal fee for a resident of Auckland, New Zealand. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only an understanding of the relevant legislation governing driver licensing fees in New Zealand, but also the ability to accurately apply mathematical principles to a real-world regulatory context. Miscalculating fees can lead to financial penalties for the applicant, damage to the reputation of the licensing authority, and potential breaches of administrative law. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness, accuracy, and compliance with the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999 and any subsequent amendments or associated fee schedules. The correct approach involves a precise calculation of the renewal fee based on the applicant's age and the duration of the license being renewed, as stipulated by the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999. Specifically, the fee structure often differentiates based on whether the applicant is under or over a certain age, e.g., 70 years, and the term of the license, e.g., 1, 5, or 10 years. The calculation must accurately reflect these variables. For instance, if the applicant is under 70 and renewing for a 10-year period, the fee would be calculated by multiplying the base fee for a 10-year license by the number of licenses being renewed, which is typically 1. If the applicant is over 70, the fee structure may change, often involving shorter renewal periods or different pricing. The regulatory justification lies in adhering to the specific fee schedule published by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, or its delegated authority, which is derived from the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999. This ensures consistency, transparency, and legal compliance in fee collection. An incorrect approach would be to apply a flat fee without considering the applicant's age or the license term. This fails to comply with the tiered fee structure mandated by the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999, which is designed to reflect different administrative costs and renewal frequencies. Ethically, it is unfair to charge individuals more or less than what is legally prescribed. Another incorrect approach would be to use an outdated fee schedule. Regulations and fee structures are subject to change, and relying on old information can lead to incorrect charges and non-compliance with current legislation. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to stay updated with regulatory requirements. A further incorrect approach might involve rounding the fee to the nearest dollar without a clear regulatory basis for doing so. While rounding might seem convenient, it can lead to overcharging or undercharging, both of which are regulatory failures. Fees must be calculated precisely according to the prescribed formula. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy and regulatory adherence. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulation and fee schedule applicable to the situation, in this case, the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999 and current NZTA fee schedules. 2. Gathering all necessary applicant information, age, license type, renewal period. 3. Performing the calculation using the exact formula and rates provided in the regulations. 4. Verifying the calculation against the source material. 5. Documenting the calculation process for audit purposes. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from the relevant regulatory body is essential.